The Strategic Innovation Fund is investing £450 million in energy network innovation because the challenge of rapidly decarbonising our energy networks is enormous. But we can do this. With collaboration, we can make the leap. A giant leap together. We need the bravest, brightest, boldest change makers from across the world to work with Innovate UK, Ofgem and the Strategic Innovation Fund to create the energy networks of the future. The best ideas targeted at the most pressing challenges that reduce emissions and save consumers money. Join us now. Take a giant leap together with the Strategic Innovation Fund at ofgem.gov.uk.
So we have some housekeeping rules. You will be muted during this event, and hopefully now the chat box is working. I can see some messages are going in there. So do please introduce yourselves. This is a networking event. Say hi, who you are, where you come from, what your interests are. And for Q&As, we actively encourage you to ask questions through the webinar. We have a Q&A session right at the end. So please, as we go through, put your Q&As in there, and we'll try and get to as many of those as possible as we go through. You will see that this event is being recorded, hence everyone being on mute. And we will be sharing the recording as well as a number of links of various different things that are going to be discussed throughout this event afterwards. Moving on to the agenda, so I'll be handing over in a minute to our colleagues in Ofgem. So we have Luke Blackerby, and then we will run through the SIF, what the future plans are, tell you all about the Round 3 Innovation Challenge processes and what those challenges are. More importantly, how you can get involved with it. And we have David Boyer joining us from the Energy Networks Association. And then we'll be talking through the support that Innovate UK can give you as a business as you work through the Strategic Innovation Fund, followed by any options to ask some questions. So without further ado, I will hand over to my colleague, Matt Hastings, who is going to set us up today. Over to you, Matt.
Great, thank you for that, Chris, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Matt Hastings. I'm the Deputy Director for the Ofgem Strategic Innovation Fund. And today is really quite an important day. Yesterday at the Innovation Zero conference, we were listening to a couple of very senior people, including Sir David King and speakers from the Potsdam Climate Research Centre. And they gave us a very stark warning about what the next 27 years look like. And in short, we basically have 7 years. 7 years to put in place the kinds of initiatives that will ultimately decide whether humanity has a future on this planet or whether it doesn't. And I'm not saying this to be over dramatic, but the Strategic Innovation Fund, alongside innovators, alongside the networks and alongside Ofgem and Innovate UK, are here to try and be part of that solution. So thank you for being with us. Next slide, please. So as many of you will know, the Strategic Innovation Fund is a £450 million fund. Sorry, thank you, Chris. And it's consumers' money, right? We're here for consumers and ultimately to deliver value for consumers. And that starts with our vision, which is split between what Ofgem's focus is and what Innovate UK's focus is. So on the left-hand side there, Ofgem's piece here is about facilitating the UK's transition to net zero at lowest cost to the consumer. And you'll hear a lot of reference to the consumer as we move through this. This is ultimately their fund. But it's also about business and how we position the UK as the Silicon Valley of energy. This is a really, really important part of the fund to Innovate UK. We want to see UK businesses working with global partners and the networks grow and scale to deliver exponential value to the UK economy. But our mission is really split into these 3 different buckets. We're here to help people, and that means cost reductions, new products and services, and cracking engagement with the consumer community. We're here to help the planet, and that means delivering significant CO2 reductions, as well as energy security and reducing risk and increasing resilience. And finally, we're here to help businesses, both large and small, to improve the energy system, to grow and to ultimately finance the net zero future that we all want to see. Next slide, please. Our strategy is very simple. It's divided into what we do and how we do it. And the what has these 3 pillars, and the how, which my colleague David Richardson is going to run through in a second, has 4 pillars in it. So the first pillar of the what in our strategy is around alignment. And that means aligning across different funders. We know that the innovation ecosystem can be complex, but we work very closely with other government departments across Innovate UK and UKRI, as well as with other regulators, to try and align funding and make it easy as possible. We also like to align across sectors, and that means bringing great innovators from the transport sector into energy, from the defence sector into energy, or from other aligning sectors, wherever they may be. And finally, we align with regulatory change. Working with the Ofgem Innovation Hub, we really focus on using innovation to establish the evidence base to challenge and evolve regulations at the speed and scale that they need to be. In the middle there, we've got responsiveness, and this is a key aspect, a unique aspect of the Strategic Innovation Fund. Every year we set 4 multi-million-pound challenges. We're one of the only funds in the UK that does that, and that enables us to really manage the external volatility in the market, which we're all so familiar with. And you'll hear a lot more about that later. We then deliver using discovery, alpha, and beta phasing. Yes, it's straight out the software development playbook, but this gives us the freedom to ultimately take a lot of risk in discovery and then take a lot less risk once we get to the larger ticket sizes in the beta projects. And then finally, it's about commercialization. For a fund that likes to fund projects, we don't like projects. And that's because they start and they stop. We don't want these things to stop. We want them to grow and scale rapidly across the UK and across the world. And with that in mind, I'd like to hand over to David, who'll talk you through the how of our strategy, Giant Leap Together.
Thank you, Matt, and good morning to everyone. My name is David Richardson. I'm Head of Innovation for the Strategic Innovation Fund at Innovate UK. And I'm very quickly going to talk to you about what the SIF is and our operating model. So the Strategic Innovation Fund is paid for by consumer bills, and as Matt already mentioned, there's 450 million available over the next 5 years. It's really focused on energy network innovation. So that's innovation in the gas and electricity networks, which ultimately will benefit the consumers that they serve. We've got a few early indication of benefits. We're now moving into our 3rd year of the SIF. We've funded around 111 projects so far and invested 18.7 million. But more importantly, we're starting to see potential cost savings of up to 3 billion and over 2 million in potential CO2 emission savings as well. Not all of those will be realised, as you'll see, because our projects don't all progress right the way through to real world demonstration, but it does show good prospects for the SIF. Next slide, please. And we deliver the SIF through this multi-phase process on an annual basis. We call this Giant Leap Together. It's an operating model that we work with other partners in industry to deliver. And this isn't just about Innovate UK and Ofgem governing projects. We start the year really looking at challenge setting, and this is the area that we've just completed. We do mass sector engagement, talk to a lot of experts in many different areas, and get input from a very diverse group of stakeholders. We then move into the fun bit, in my view, ideation and incubation. That's where we start getting really great ideas from people like yourselves and forming partnerships with the most appropriate energy networks before moving into the acceleration phase at the end of the year, which is when you'll submit your ideas formally with your energy network partners, and when we also hold the Energy Innovation Summit, which is the National Innovation Summit focused around energy network innovation, but also trying to bring in all aspects of the whole system. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to touch quickly and recognise the role that other organisations play in the energy network innovation ecosystem. We work very closely with Ofgem in partnership on the Strategic Innovation Fund and treat ourselves as one team. But furthermore, we work with the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero to ensure we can better coordinate innovation funding, and also to try and ensure that the policy and regulatory change mechanism really runs in unison with innovation. We've also got the knowledge transfer network, Innovate UK KTN supporting us. They run some IX challenges, which are really focused innovation procurement, and we can share links for some of those if you're interested. They also work on cross-sector partnerships, bringing in capabilities from other sectors. The Energy Innovation Centre on the right-hand side of this slide are a key partner in delivering support for third-party innovators, really helping to bring you up to speed with the focus and priority areas for the gas and electricity networks. And then lastly, the Energy Networks Association, which are really the representatives of the energy networks in GB. They host the Smarter Networks portal, which has a wealth of knowledge from all sorts of projects on it. And they help to run Network Innovation Allowance funding and also lead initiatives like the Open Networks project, which really are moving the needle on how the networks operate across all networks. And we'll be hearing more from them later. But for now, I'll hand you over to Luke before we dive into what the round 3 challenges are. Over to you, Luke.
Thanks, David. Hello, everyone. Firstly, it's great to see some people have joined. Really exciting to see that level of engagement and excitement about this. I'm Luke Ames Blackaby. I coordinate the SIF from Ofgem's side. My job is to try and make sure the fund achieves those goals of a rapid transition to net zero and delivering for consumers. I'm just going to very quickly outline innovation at Ofgem, a bit of background to why we think these challenges are so important and the process we use to get there, and then also a bit of what we want to see from this round. So I think firstly, it's just to kind of follow up on Matt and the point he was making around the scale of the challenge we have to try and meet. We've set up the SIF to try and make sure we focus on those big, risky, high impact projects that can help us get to our very, very challenging targets. It's not going to be easy, but that's why we have invested this amount, or look to invest this amount of money to try and make sure we get the right projects. And it's also why we brought on Innovate UK to do the essential work they do in managing this process as well as they can. In terms of the challenge setting itself, the SIF is a follow-up to the Network Innovation Competition. We introduced the SIF to try and make the process of identifying the innovations we want to see a bit more targeted and in line with our policy and strategy goals. We see the challenge setting as an essential part of this process. By setting those challenges for the industry, we can make clear what Ofgem sees as the key areas that we think innovation is needed in. And so for us, it's really important we get this right. It's the first time that I've seen the challenge process, setting process in action, and it's really, really in depth. I've been so impressed with it, and we're really happy with the round 1 and 2 challenges. But for round 3, we wanted to try and make sure that these are a bit more targeted, a bit more focused on the areas that we think need to be addressed. And the process has been extensive. So you'll hear about it more later, but just to cover it from what we've seen, we've had a team at IUK working on this for months now. They've gone to the Energy Innovation Base Camp. We've done an Ofgem consultation. We've had meetings with and sessions with hundreds of different people from across the entire energy system. And through this, we've been able to identify what we think are the kind of priority areas, and everything's been signed off by Ofgem's executive committee. So I think this offers a really strong insight into Ofgem's views around what are the priorities for innovation and where we think work needs to happen. And so I think when you come away from the session, you can take it as this is what Ofgem wants to see. And a huge thank you to Innovate UK for getting something as kind of well formulated and clear as this. Now looking forward to actually what we want to see from this round. We are really pleased with the projects that are underway for round 1 beta, or we're looking at for round 1 beta, and that are currently underway for round 2 discovery. For round 3, one thing I would shout out that we're really hoping for is more small innovators coming through. We want to see more small innovators coming forward, putting ideas to networks, getting taken on board, and then going from ideation right through to commercialization. That's an area that we think there's a huge amount of value to be added, and something which we're always looking for. And so please, if you have any challenges or issues, reach out to us, IUK, in doing that. I guess finally, I just want to cap off and say I can't personally wait to see what happens with these different projects. I think these challenges are great. I think they provide us with the best opportunity for delivering on our goals. So finally, a huge thanks to IUK for leading this process, and I'll hand over to Manu.
Great. Thanks, Luke. Hi all, good morning. My name is Manu Ravishankar. I'm an innovation lead for the Strategic Innovation Fund at Innovate UK. So I'm just going to be following on from the outline that Luke has given in terms of how we undertook the process of challenge setting, to give you a little bit more information of the process itself that led to the challenges that we're going to be discussing. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. So I'll start talking from kind of left to right on this challenge setting process. So, right at the start, we kicked off with individual expert discussions, and these included people from industry, consumer groups, and academia. And actually from the chats, I can see a lot of people that we spoke to have kind of joined us today, which is great. So what we did was we extracted relevant targets and commitments that's there in the net zero strategy. So we looked at heat and buildings, we looked at power, we looked at hydrogen, we looked at industry, and also we looked at transport. And then kind of using those commitments and targets that are present in those different sectors, we then had a series of semi-structured discussions with those experts to kind of identify energy system and energy network barriers to achieving those net zero goals and objectives. We then overlaid this with problem statements that came out of the base camp that the Energy Networks Association ran, and this gave us some additional challenges to consider. And essentially overall, this discussion generated around 140 challenges, which then we consolidated down to 8 challenge areas using the kind of criteria that you see on the top left-hand side image, which essentially were, does this barrier lend itself to strategic innovation? Can the energy networks play a useful and material role in this innovation? Is it timely to work on now? Which is, we use 2035 as the marker. So in this round, we really want to support and incentivize innovation that will be commercially available to us by 2035. Matt essentially emphasized at the start of this call, we're really running out of time in terms of net zero, and we really need to kind of bring forward some of these efforts. And the last one is it kind of building off of a pre-existing work? Is it complementary to what's been done? And is it truly additional? So then we moved on to the next phase, where the kind of consolidated challenges were taken to 9 different workshops, which had between kind of 10 to 30 people. And these included energy networks themselves. We also included a new stakeholder group this time, investors. We had the academia, we had policymakers, we had the regulator Ofgem, and we had network users in these workshops as well. So what essentially we asked of these stakeholders in these workshops was to vote on their top 4 headline challenges and their top 3 specific kind of scope of projects that they would like to see. So that was the phase 2 of the challenge setting exercise. The third phase was really kind of bringing together all of this feedback, and importantly then assessing what areas of consensus were there, considering stakeholder interests and the number of people represented by different stakeholders, etc. So what we were really looking for was, is there support for this innovation both across different stakeholder groups and within stakeholder groups? So for example, is this something innovators, investors, regulator, policymakers, and industry want? And do we get a kind of critical mass of people within these stakeholders interested and passionate about these challenges? And we then consolidated that, and we kind of worked with the Ofgem Innovation Hub team, with Luke and others, our expert panels, and also we convened for the first time, this time around, an innovation challenge group to give us feedback on the framing of the challenges, and also to kind of sense check that we've arrived at the kind of right 4 challenges. This was finally taken to the Ofgem Executive Committee, which resulted in a kind of few iterations, but then that kind of gave us the final 4 challenges that you will see today. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So the challenges themselves have evolved since we first launched it 2 years ago. And this is a critical aspect of SIF. I think Matt mentioned this. It is a highly agile funding instrument and program that can continuously adapt and iterate to align with the prevailing sector and market needs. So as you can see, other than the character length significantly increasing from round 1 to round 3, there's a kind of method behind the madness in terms of getting to more specific challenges. So we've got 5 core principles that we use to evolve these challenges, and which will be continuously be looking at as it grows. The first one is getting more specific. And again, this does not mean we pick winners, but we just are being very clear on what the energy system needs are. And then we allow the innovators to come forward with solutions. But we need to provide that direction for people to come to us with the right ideas. The second one is kind of being agile. As you know, the sector and the system is very dynamic, and as are the times that we live in. Therefore, we need to respond to aspects like the cost of living challenge, geopolitical volatility, supply chain constraints, and that's exactly what we're doing. The third is, it is a hub of activity, energy innovation ecosystem in the UK. So we need to continuously align and also continuously assess the additionality of what we're bringing forward in the context of these other kind of programs that's happening. And the fourth one is quite important. We also actively consider how best to draw attention to cross-cutting issues like consumer vulnerability or data digitalization. We think about whether we should bring them forward as specific challenges, like we've done in the first and the second round, or is it better to embed them in very specific use cases of what we need in the system? And we really come to this conclusion based on a lot of expert discussions. And finally, the policy and regulatory space is also very dynamic. So we really consider the role of innovation as critical evidence on where changes may potentially be made in the current frameworks, but also as a critical source of evidence to support future developments and direction of travel in policy and regulation. And this really underpins our thinking in terms of how we evolve our challenges. We can move on to the next slide, please. I will then hand over to David to start setting the context on the challenges.
Thanks, Manu. And I'd like to take a moment just to recognise the extensive work that Manu's put into delivering these challenges. He's really been the architect of the process, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for where we've got to. If we could move on to the next slide. We'd like to start by just articulating the extent of the challenge. And I think from a personal perspective, it's been really eye-opening this year that we're moving into the period of the energy transition where we're really getting down to business. A lot of the conversations have started being around deliverability and the unintended consequences of some of the choices that we're likely to make over the next few years. And to really navigate this effectively, we need to think about the whole system impacts. We talk about this quite a lot, but Manu and I are going to try and articulate some of the more focused issues that we found through the challenge setting process this year. So the first part is that we need to keep consumers right at the heart of the energy transition. We understand that there's real life problems that are being experienced, and we look at consumers not just as domestic consumers, but also as customers, business consumers as well of the energy networks. We know that there's an energy affordability problem, and we also know that there's a risk of some people not being able to access the benefits of the energy transition as quickly as others. Last year, we set a supporting a just energy transition challenge, and some of you may, and justifiably so, say, why isn't there a just energy or a vulnerability challenge this year? The reason for that is that we want to see it across all of the challenges. This is something that needs to be taken into account right the way from transmission level electricity projects all the way down to consumer flexibility products at the other end of the system. It's no longer okay to say we don't interact directly with consumers, therefore we don't need to worry about them. We've started to understand that some of the choices that are made in different parts of the system are going to enable people to decarbonize by one route or another. And we also really want to see things which will unlock and enable us to scale the rollout of distributed energy resources. And we need to ensure that that's not just done for those who are most financially able to purchase those assets, but also all areas of society. Manu, do you want to talk about the supply side of the picture?
Thanks, David. Absolutely. I think so. Just picking up on the point that David is making, that our kind of individual choices, but also strategic choices we make on the strategic kind of policy level has a big implication on the energy system. So, for example, to meet the net zero target and also to meet demand for low carbon energy, we need to rapidly and significantly scale up a low carbon generation in the UK. And we've got some numbers here, but just to give you the sense of the scale and urgency, we need 2 times the amount of offshore wind, we need 4 times the amount of offshore wind, and we need 5 times the amount of solar PV. Not in 30, 40 years, we need this in 12 years. And essentially this needs the fastest build out and connection rate that we've ever done in the history of the energy system. And kind of in addition to that, we've also got relatively new technology coming onto the system, such as hydrogen electrolyzers, which already have a massive pipeline that needs developing, that needs to be built and integrated to the system. Whilst we recognize that there are several challenges associated with this pace and scale of build out, the one that's been highlighted as a critical delivery risk is timely connection and availability of energy network infrastructure. David, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're now moving into the period of the energy transition where we're not trying to work out the solutions to problems on a system level scale. We're actually trying to implement some of these innovations as well. And it's really become clear that the pace and scale of network build out required is completely unprecedented. As Manu mentioned, one of the bits of feedback we had over and over again is, I can't get a connection quick enough and it's too costly for me. We really think we need to start thinking creatively about how do we assess the future needs and demands in various areas on the energy system so that we can start thinking about making those investments as soon as possible. We also think there's a good opportunity for innovation in commercial and financial models so that we can unlock agreements between different parties and really be able to leverage flexibility and get the most out of the system that we've got at the moment. But the fact of the matter is that we're going to be scaling up delivery of our energy infrastructure significantly over the next couple of decades. The concerning thing is the rest of the world is going to be doing that as well at the same time. So we're already starting to see supply chain constraints. We had a taste of this during the pandemic, but now we're going to have all areas of the world really looking for demand for HVDC cables, for rare earth materials, for substation components, transformers, new materials for gas piping, hydrogen electrolyzers. These are problems which are becoming real. So we need to think about how we consider those supply chain demands during our innovation projects as well. Manu, over to you for the final bit.
Thanks, David. So I think the last one is really the enabling frameworks, which is the final layer of the diagram that you see on the left. So there is an enormous program of work that's happening across the government and the regulator to evolve policy, regulation, and markets, which really were primarily developed for a different type of energy system that existed in the last 75, 80 years. And what we're trying to do is trying to make it work and adapt it and evolve it for a future energy system whose concept and specifics actually are still being worked out in parallel. And that's really the complexity of this challenge. So what we really need is a co-development of innovation and these enabling frameworks in parallel to make sure they're fit for purpose and they're kind of evidence-based. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So I think really in this context is where we position the challenges for round 3 of SIF. So, these really kind of underpin our focus. So what we've identified are kind of 4 sets of challenges which we feel are critical and timely to address to make kind of material progress to net zero and also unlock economic opportunities for UK PLC. I won't go into each of these challenges in detail. We've got a set of slides after this, and my colleagues from our team will come in and kind of talk about this. But broadly, the areas we've picked out for round 3 are going from top to bottom, the planning and the connections process, whose criticality that David outlined in the last slide, and essentially how we can use innovation to kind of accelerate this in a more coordinated manner. The second one is, how do we go about harnessing advancements in technology, data, and digitalization to really improve all aspects of the power system to make sure it's kind of ready to go for the net zero power system target in 12 years' time. The third one is the critical area of heat decarbonization. We really think there's an opportunity to make heat decarbonization easier, better for consumers, and more cost-effective through the use of flexibility in connections and operations. And finally, focusing on a new but critical area of the power system, which is power to gas, and how we might be able to harness its potential to support the energy system more widely. So that's really the strategic context and the focus areas for the 4 challenges. I'll now hand over to my colleague Ellen to start talking about the challenges in a little bit more detail. Over to you, Ellen.
Thanks, Manu. So challenge 1 is geared towards solving the deliverability challenges of achieving net zero. So we received consistent messages throughout the challenge setting process that related to this challenge. Firstly, that stakeholders wanted greater understanding of the availability of future energy supply options to enable them to make better decarbonisation choices. Secondly, that many energy projects are being held up because the process of securing a network connection is too slow or prohibitively expensive, which David and Manu have touched on. Finally, that decarbonisation choices are being made in a too siloed manner. So, for example, if a heavy goods transport fleet better understood that electrification of a commercial site down the road was impacting on the network availability, then they could make a different decarbonisation choice or coordinate their usage or financial agreements. So these are really important areas to innovate in if we're going to achieve a swift transition at the best cost to consumers. And there are significant opportunities to be realised from harnessing digital simulation techniques and modelling to better understand the most optimal system planning and connections required for the user demand needs. So we believe that significant benefits can be realised by looking at this from a full energy system level and not just looking at planning and connections only at the distribution or transmission level. So working across electricity and gas vectors for most optimal solutions. So as has already been mentioned, the scale to delivering net zero is massive, particularly from an infrastructure rollout perspective. Technical innovations, including digital solutions, will better help us maximise the use of existing capacity in our networks, but also to accelerate upgrades and new connections where needed. So the innovations we're interested in under this challenge aren't purely technical. Throughout the challenge setting process, stakeholder feedback has been that there are innovation opportunities in developing commercial models between generators and demand off-takers, a process and legal innovation, and potentially novel and institutional and governance arrangements to better coordinate between networks, local authorities, generators, and demand users and others. So to wrap up on challenge one, consumers should be kept at the front of mind when developing ideas for this challenge. And these are both domestic customers, but also the commercial and industrial consumers. So ultimately, these are the customers of the energy networks that the industry will want to serve with an excellent user experience and understanding what best decarbonisation choices for their needs and delivered at the earliest opportunity with minimum disruption. So with that, I will pass back to Manu for challenge two.
Thanks, Ellen. Yeah, so challenge two is to read out the headline, it's novel technical process and market approaches to deliver an equitable and secure net zero power system. So this challenge is very specifically focused on the policy objective to make our power system net zero by 2035. And we've previously talked about this. There are significant infrastructure challenges to doing this. We need to roll out the scale of renewable integration. And alongside that, we need energy networks to be well coordinated and expand at a significant scale to accommodate that new generation and to serve new demand that are opened up by, for example, hydrogen and or electrification. So this will create completely new challenges on how to maintain system stability and how we provide energy during periods of very low renewable generation in a system that's going to be increasingly weather dependent. And also, as we roll out more distributed energy resources and digitalize the system to kind of manage a net zero power system more effectively, that brings its own kind of risks and consideration in terms of resilience, of how we coordinate the overall system, and also how secure the system is to things like cyber attacks. So in this context, we think there are two key capabilities that will be needed to kind of operate this system securely. The first one is that there's a technology angle. We need new technologies and new energy network assets to be deployed. And these will be critical to provide system resilience and stability and security, and also help to kind of maximize the use of low carbon energy. And also because we'll be moving to an increasingly complex system, this is critical to kind of dynamically coordinate not only supply and demand, but also things like flexibility and network capacity, which are increasingly critical for the energy system operation. So that's the technical element. And like Ellen said in the previous challenge, this challenge is more about, it's not just about technology, but I think alongside this, we'll also need significant innovations in markets, in processes as well. Because imagine a future energy system where we've got hundreds of thousands of distributed assets, operating in kind of harmony to maintain system stability, reliability, and across all of this, we need to kind of coordinate and run the system so that consumers and other network users are able to get the right price signals, respond accordingly, and kind of access the kind of variety of energy system and network revenue streams that might exist. So, and also I'd like to call out that this a specific part of this challenge is long duration storage and understanding what role that they can play in a future power system. And we've got that, you can see that in scope 3, which is specifically aiming to explore not only, again, the technical element, but also the market innovations that will be required to kind of enable long duration flexibility to kind of participate and integrate in a future power system effectively. And finally, to say that, we've kind of spoken about this, how an equitable and a just transition needs to be part of the SIF program. And really, it should be considered, across all of the round 3 challenges. But, you can see that scope 4 in this is specifically calling that out and is looking for innovations which enable kind of marginalized or disadvantaged consumer segments to be able to benefit from this kind of energy system transition, this new market opportunities, this new digital system that we're talking about. We really want to see ambitious and kind of multidisciplinary consortia forming. I'm really kind of heartened to see that the different people have just been scanning the kind of different introductions. So, we've got innovators, we've got technical innovators, we've got social scientists, we got market experts, policy experts on the call. So we really want these kind of people to come together, that kind of, all the skill sets that are kind of needed to help develop game-changing innovations. So that's challenge 2. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Kate Jones, to talk about challenge 3.
Thanks, Manu. Hi, everybody. I'm Kate. I'm also an innovation lead. So challenge 3 is really geared around coordination and visibility of electric heat demand so that the energy networks can effectively network plan and offer flexibility so we can have a greener and more affordable energy system. Electrification of heat is already adding significant load to the power systems, with targets like 600,000 heat pump installations by 2028 and the devolved administrations having more ambitious targets. This demand is expected to start accelerating rapidly in the near term. This challenge is not just about heat flexibility, it's also about the coordination of flexibility. The flexibility focus in this challenge could come from various forms like storage, electric vehicles, or coupling approaches that might have links between the gas sector and the electricity sector to help manage and flatten out any peaks, but also minimize reinforcement. But all of these need to be centered around the objective of decarbonizing heat and achieving those aims that are set out on the right-hand side of this slide. The heat decarbonisation aspects of projects within this challenge shouldn't be linked by a conceptual narrative of how it might support heat decarbonisation. The heat use case needs to be an active component within the project that explores alongside that the flexibility. We can all agree enabling full system flexibility of all types is important, but through our challenge setting phase, our stakeholder feedback has been that the focusing on a specific use case will drive tangible and measurable outputs, and heat electrification was highlighted as the most timely option to focus on. There are many problems that we know we need to address to scale and overcome, but we also see many opportunities in delivering commercial ready products, which can then scale quickly. Heat pumps are not the only form of electrified heat that we're interested in, though. The recent growth in heat networks and district heating schemes offer unique opportunities for providing flexibility to the power system. Later in the presentation, I'll share a bit more about how you can find out about our round 2 projects, which look at heat network integration, and it would be worth exploring them before any ideas come through. It was also acknowledged in our challenge setting process that we need to consider the scale up of electrical loads on the network holistically, but focusing on that single use case that can be transferred and then scaled up to other areas like transport and commercial decarbonisation. Like Manu just said in the last challenge, an area of particular interest is how long duration storage can help decouple electricity demand and supply, and then help to minimise those system costs and maximise renewable consumption. I'll share a little bit more later on in the presentation about an ideation workshop that will focus on this topic specifically. But for now, I'll hand to Beth to talk about challenge 4.
Good morning. So I'm Beth Foster. I'm also one of the innovation leads here at the Strategic Innovation Fund. So I'm going to give a little bit more context to this challenge because I come from a gas transmission background and this is really quite exciting for me. So Challenge 4 is about enabling power to gas to provide system flexibility and energy network optimization. So as a background to set the scene, when fossil fuel generation is high in the UK, the energy networks do a really good job at finding ways to reduce demand on the network so we can reduce our carbon heavy consumption. Now, electrolyzers are fantastic flexibility assets because you can effectively turn them on and off on demand. System modeling shows that out of 16.8 gigawatts of demand reduction across the system during periods of lowest renewable output, electrolyzers contribute 60% of that demand reduction. So another really key aspect to sort of this power to gas and the use of electrolyzers is their ability to vector shift. Now, what do I mean about vector shifting? Picture this. Renewable generation in the UK is really high. You turn the electrolyzers on and you generate lots of green hydrogen. You then store that green hydrogen in various ways. And then when fossil fuel generation starts to creep up at times of low renewable generation, then you can use that green hydrogen to power gas turbines to generate green electricity. So this is a really cool opportunity to utilize vector shifting. But the critical enabler for this technology is our ability to store hydrogen for long duration and to store it efficiently and effectively. So there's been lots of research around this area, and we're going to need to do more research on long duration storage. And we also need to optimize electrolyzers, storage locations, transmission, whether that's either the power or the gas side. And we need mass coordination across the hydrogen value chain. So innovators, what do we actually want from you? So we want demonstrative technologies that optimize electrolyzer deployment and operation and to increase their application in flexibility services. We also want commercial and technical innovation to secure system benefits from hydrogen storage. We want innovative solutions to constraint management in the hydrogen value chain, which means improved business models and design for long duration storage. I'm now going to hand over to the rest of the team to take you through how you can get involved.
Thanks, Beth. So I'm just going to wrap up on the challenges, just to highlight that we have got 4 separate challenge webinars where we'll dig into each of these challenges in a little bit more detail and lay the groundwork of past projects that have been carried out so that you can build upon them. I'd quickly like to just touch on a few areas here which we see as cross-cutting principles for all round 3 proposals. So please keep these front and centre of your mind. We've mentioned the just energy aspect to all the projects and supporting disadvantaged consumers as a first point of call. We want to see whole system integrated approaches to problem solving and solution development. That's not just in the energy networks, so we're not just talking distribution and transmission. We're also interested in how does the retail market play a role, how do generators, and also how do the other sectors that the energy networks serve participate as well. Digitalization and open data it continues to grow as an important area of the sector. And we'll really be looking for all projects to follow Ofgem's energy data best practice guidance, which the networks are now required to follow into their license conditions. And some of that includes taking a presumed open approach to data publication. Finally, we really want to see focus on user-centric design, engaging with consumers and customers and people within the business of the energy networks right from the outset. Ultimately, we're designing all this for people and planet, so we really need to ensure that those people are engaged in the process right from the earliest stages. If we could skip on to the next slide, and I'll hand over to Kate to just talk about the GLT process in a little bit more detail.
Great, thanks, David. So we're getting into the really juicy bit now, and this is going to be how you can get involved. Before I get into it, I just kind of wanted to recap what David said earlier in the process. So Giant Leap Together is our operating model. It's an annual process that we follow, but it's not just a turn of phrase. It's about the way that we work together to achieve net zero. So you heard about our challenge stage and how we got to the 4 challenges that we've published. And from today, we're moving into our ideation phase. So this is about how do we get to the new ideas to solve these challenges and help the networks think and do things differently. In mid-August, we'll then move into the incubation phase, which is all about working with successful pitches and the energy networks to develop strong partnerships and shape the best proposals ready for the application into the funding. And then finally, the last phase is about acceleration into the discovery phase, into the feasibility and the project work beginning. Now, we have a ton of ways that you can get involved between now and mid-August, so I have a lot to tell you. And it would, if we go on to the next slide, my colleague will be putting all this detail in the chat in just a moment. So I'd really recommend that you copy some of the links that we're sharing. So first up, we have a couple of events taking place that will help people learn more about the challenges. So throughout the day, we've just kind of given the overview of the challenges, but we have 4 in-depth sessions that we'll be hosting. And we'll be having a discussion about each of the challenges individually with policymakers, networks and existing projects, key industry experts, and there'll be an opportunity to get to grips with what the project is looking to address, what the challenge is looking to address, and what's been achieved to date and where those opportunities are. And you can register to attend those events now, and we'd love to see you there. The other things that are worth noting that we've got going on, so this is our 3rd round of competitions. We also have our round 2 discovery show and tells, which cover a range of topics, but that'll give you a flavour as to what the existing projects are to date. So for example, I covered some of the heat challenge on the 15th of June. We have 2 sessions which focus on heat network integration and then heat flexibility. And don't forget, at the moment, with where the projects are in the cycle, there's an opportunity to partner with these projects, in some cases through to the alpha phase. So it's a really good chance to get involved that way there. And don't worry, these sessions are going to be recorded and the information will be available to people. But it's also worth looking out on the ENA Smarter Networks portal to find out more. And again, you can register for these sessions right now. Also, if you're sitting here thinking, what is energy network innovation? Maybe you're wondering what the difference is between an energy network and a supplier. We've got you covered. We have a mini online series which we're hosting around the role of the energy networks, what energy network innovation is, and you can register interest also through the links in the chat there. Next up, we have, oh, sorry, not next slide, next thing we've got. We're going to be offering for the first time what we're calling innovator surgeries. And this is 20 slots that are up for grabs with the Innovate UK's innovation team to offer you insights, constructive feedback, and discuss opportunities to enhance your ideas, as well as exploring other routes of funding through Innovate UK. And this is really on a first come, first served basis. We're trialing it out this year and it's open to any innovator who wishes to discuss their idea or technology. So if you're ready to take your idea to the next level already, we've also got you covered. You can submit any of your ideas on any of the challenges from the 1st of June through the Innovate UK's Innovation Funding System platform. We'll have a call for ideas where every idea will receive feedback. And if successful, you'll be asked to pitch to the energy networks to secure funding. And we'll have 3 tranches of closing dates, but ultimately the call for ideas will close in mid-August. Now, we've mentioned throughout the day that there's a couple of key topics that we want to focus on in these challenges. And we'll be running ideation workshops where you can join innovators and experts to discuss further ideas in the topics of cybersecurity, long duration storage, and multi-energy systems. Again, you can register your chat and register your interest through the link in the chat. And lastly, for all successful projects, we'll be running an in-person and online partnership workshop to really support and develop impactful matchmaking partnerships to support application. For our round 2 challenges, we saw huge success for proposals that got involved in this process. So I really want to encourage you to get involved. And it's worth mentioning, all of us are super active on LinkedIn, YouTube, and our podcast. And without sounding too corny, it would be really good if you like and subscribe to our newsletter to find out the latest. Thanks for listening. And for now, I'll pass over to David Boyer.
Hi, thank you, Kate. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Perfect, thanks. And I'll just quickly to say thank you to all of you, the Innovate UK team, for the opportunity to speak. And it's great to be here today and having these challenges launched. It's a big part of the calendar and in a very important program. So brilliant to see. My name is David Boyer. I'm the Director for Electricity Systems at the ENA, and we represent all of the network operators in the UK, gas and electricity overall. Just to start things out, I want to cover a few higher points of context, I guess, from the network's perspective as we come into this innovation program, and then I'll give a few thoughts and a few pointers and references for you looking to respond in these challenge areas, for how you can get a bit more context and details through the ENA or through the other kind of resources available to innovators. I guess a few points of context I think are worth noting. The first thing I'd say is it really is a significant strategic focus for all of the networks on innovation itself. We all recognize, all of the networks recognize the degree of challenge faced in the energy transition and the opportunity for innovation and responding to that. And you will see that every one of the networks companies has dedicated innovation functions. They have declared executive level innovation strategies, and they all work collaboratively to in a program of innovation, both within their companies and across the whole sector, something that ENA supports quite a bit of. And so there's really a big commitment to innovation as a capability and as necessary to support the energy transition. A couple of the things I want to reflect on as successes for what's come before, because the sector through these innovation programs really has come a long way and achieved a lot for customers and for net zero to date. And I think that's worth reflecting on in terms of what's been achieved, and also as a reminder and kind of a hopefully sets thinking going and encourages kind of the ambition and the innovative thinking in this round. But if I think back to when I joined the industry, which was not yesterday, some of the achievements that have been delivered through innovation, specifically, if we think about the net zero transition, is distributed generation and renewable resources. Those were things that were not around originally when the networks were designed. When I joined the sector, there was one planning engineer with one filing cabinet of about 20 distributed generation connections to a particular distribution network operator. And that was the whole thing. And we're now in a world where there's 50 gigawatts and more of renewable energy connected to the system. All of the distribution network operators have significant non-firm advanced kind of connect and management schemes for customers joining the network. And that is all directly as a result of innovation programs, very much like SIF. I think they had different titles back in the day, but that's very much where we have come from and an important achievement. Similarly, if we think about building network infrastructure and the need for capacity to support this, all of the network operators will have come historically from a asset management, build assets to support infrastructure and asset bases kind of mindset. But we are very much not in that world, and that's because of innovation. All of the network operators run quite significant flexibility programs, and they have a smart flexibility first approach through the biggest flexibility market in Europe. And that again is a direct result of significant innovation programs since these types of programs were launched. So I think those are a couple examples that I think could help remind us where we've come from, and also give us a bit of a challenge and a bit of encouragement coming into these challenge sessions. So really worth reflecting on. If I think about SIF and how it works across the funding mechanism and how networks view that, it's a really important part of responding to the challenges described, and how networks can support the net zero transition. If we think about NIA and SIF and how they interact, I guess the way I'd characterize this for everyone here is that the Network Innovation Allowance provides an agile mechanism that is evolutionary, and it supports low TRL, small demonstrator projects, and enhancements and innovations across a large range of kind of operational and core business areas. But the Strategic Innovation Fund, we do see, complements that very nicely here around significant strategic revolutionary innovation ideas and delivering large-scale demonstrations that support them being matured and deployed. So these challenges described today really do play an important part in the overall innovation programs and complement the other funding mechanisms as well. If you have any questions about or reflections on how that works and how they interact, on the ENA website, there's the Energy Networks Innovation Process guidance document that you can see there, and that will give you a bit of visibility of how they may interact and how they complement each other, if that helps in terms of the context here for these challenge sessions. A few of the other things I'd mentioned then in terms of how these challenges kind of sit within the role of the ENA and the way that the networks approach innovation. I mentioned earlier that all the networks work very much collaboratively through ENA working groups to jointly identify and prioritize and have visibility of innovation ideas. That supports them being delivered collaboratively when there are opportunities to do so. It also supports and mitigates risks around duplication. So those groups, as they do their work, have recorded all of the achievements of the innovation programs to date on the Smarter Networks portal, which is hosted by the ENA. And I really encourage everyone on the call to look at the Smarter Networks portal in terms of understanding what work has come before and we're building on, both again as inspiration, but also recognizing that through all this innovation we should be standing on the shoulders of those who come before us. So there's a lot of work there for you to be aware of and refer to, and that can guide and input the innovation ideas that you have. And finally, I think I'd say that within the innovation program of activities that we have in the year, we ran a base camp event earlier in 2023, which hopefully many of you will have been on. Those ideas are going through review and pitching, and we're very still keen that they progress. If you feel that any of those support are relevant to these challenge sessions, then please call those out as we go through the pitching process and engage with the Innovate UK team to discuss those a bit further. And also finally, as we go through the year, very much looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible at the summit later in the year. Halloween in Liverpool is what we're saying, where we can hear both about the NIA programs as well as the SIF programs, and also have some more proactive conversations that we're looking forward to on what's to come. So that's, I think, all the signposting I want to do, and hopefully kind of about to time. But I see a question in the chat about the Smarter Networks portal link. Yeah, hopefully that's brilliant. Thanks, Dave, already in there. Please do use that. And that's all I had. Back to you, Kate or David.
I think it's over to me. Thanks for that, David. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Paderith, and I look after the commercial side of the programme. My colleagues have already taken you through how the fund works, our round 3 challenge themes, and also how to get involved. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about our support for business and innovators. As Matt outlined up front, we want the SIF to be about more than just projects. We want to see those projects become products and services with great new businesses being created that can grow and scale across the UK and internationally. For us to achieve our wider ambition for the SIF, we have to make sure that innovators, and it's nice to see that there's hundreds of you on this call, get the help, support and confidence that you need to become the solutions providers and supply chain for a future energy network. And just touching on some of the challenges we hear from you. So we hear that early advice around an idea can be hard to come by. We hear that building effective consortia is challenging. We hear that the time it takes for an idea to become a commercial reality can be a barrier. That sourcing funding, procurement, recruitment of talent, intellectual property, regulatory understanding and supply chain are all challenges that our SMEs and innovators face time and again. So what are we doing? Firstly, we know that early advice is crucial for a company's success. Through Innovate UK's EDGE programme, we offer free expert business support for SMEs, whether you're starting up, experiencing high growth or scaling. This advice includes financial readiness support, where we can help SMEs and innovators plan their commercial strategy, look at their funding options and execute their plans. We've also recognised the need for sector-specific advice. So the next step for us in working closely with our industry partners is creating the mechanisms that can provide enhanced energy systems advisory. We're acutely aware of the challenges for SMEs around growth finance and investment. So through Innovate UK's Innovation Hub, we're supporting the showcasing of SIF innovators who are actively seeking finance. This is a great way for you to let investors know that you're in our programme and also that you're looking for funding. I think the platform now has almost 100 institutional investors signed up who are actively looking at the investable propositions being hosted. And alongside this, we have a broad engagement strategy with relevant funders right across the spectrum, from seed funding right through to debt and infrastructure funders. And what we recognise here is that it's not just about knowing who has money and what they're interested in, but also about them recognising SIF as a source of deal flow for companies with solid and investable value propositions. We also have an expansive international focus for our programme. So through partnerships with international innovation initiatives, we have access to global gas and electricity utilities. We know that if we want to see high growth scaling companies with long-term futures, we need to help you tap into these markets and seize new opportunities. And this is a two-way process for us, because as well as supporting you in that wider market reach, we're also focused on the role that international innovators and supply chain partners can play here. And access to this pool of talent and innovation can be of value to your company, especially as we encourage thinking and partnerships that embrace an international dimension. My colleagues have mentioned already that SIF is supportive of projects and ideas that challenge existing ways of working, including those that impact on regulatory or policy aspects as part of their delivery. Now, from an innovator perspective, we can play a role here too. So if you have questions about what regulation and policy means to you and your business, let us know. We can put you in touch with the right people to get you the answers you need. And I think one of our colleagues from Ofgem's Innovation Hub, Victoria Pelka, had put a link up in the chat as well for some signposting to support there. Now, finally, I want to highlight that our offering to business is evolving all of the time. One thing we're working on just now is the creation of an innovator forum. So it's a way to give a real-time collective voice to innovators in this space, helping us stay in touch with the innovator journey and benefit from ongoing insights that can strengthen the programme and how we evolve what we're doing. So keep in touch and reach out if you need our support. And I'll now hand you back to Chris.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks everybody. Just going to be wrapping up really on what you've seen today. So summary information, we've had quite a few questions around it. We will be sharing the recording. We'll be sharing a download of the chat. We'll be sharing all of the links and all of the accessibilities with the various different events, surgeries, everything that our colleagues have talked about today. We will be providing you with all the registration information for that, as well as the recording. So please do get involved. We've also talked about our newsletter. We've got a really great website, and we write blogs, podcasts, etc. So there's lots of different ways in which you can get engaged and involved and find out more information. And yeah, as it says, let your imagination run wild. We really want to see those biggest, brightest ideas, as the video said right at the beginning. It's all about trying to overcome the challenges we have in getting to net zero with our networks, and doing it in a way that is ambitious. So please do bring in what you have, and these pitching events, we have the call for ideas being launched. There's just so much going on, and we're really looking forward to speaking to you. And here is on screen some of those connection points. Yeah, my colleague Karen is putting them in the chat, but as I said, we will be sharing these with you at the end of the week when we send out the recordings. Okay, so we've had lots of really good questions in, and I'm going to be asking my colleagues to sort of come in and provide some answers to you. We have had quite a few. We've got until I think 11:30, so hopefully we'll be able to get through a good chunk of them. If there's any that we can't get to, we will follow up with you separately afterwards, and we will also provide any written responses with those sharings as we go. So I'm going to start with my colleague Kate, if that's okay, Kate. We've had a question around consortium buildings. How does that go about? What's the support available? And also, can you kind of reiterate the dates and the differences between the call for ideas and then when round 3 actually opens for applications and discovery?
Yeah, I can do that, Chris. So at the moment, we've only got our call for ideas open. So this is ideas that you want to pitch that can address those challenges. And they will pitch to the energy networks because we have to have an energy network lead the funding. So that will be open from the 1st of June till the end of August. And if those bids are successful and the sponsorship from the networks, we'll be working with KTN, EIC and ENA to look at these partnership forums. And at that point, there is specific partner requirements within each of the challenges. And we'll be looking at that point to develop the projects to get the best consortium, really. What was the third bit of the question, Chris? There's quite a lot in there.
Around the dates and the differences between call for ideas and the challenges.
Yeah, call for ideas and the funding. So once the networks, our network has sponsored your idea to go through, the networks themselves will develop the application, and that application will open in September and close in November, and that will go through the funding assessment process. So this at the minute is just how do we get the best ideas and then build the projects that can meet these challenges, and then the last stage is the getting the funding. Dates are, some of the dates are still TBC, and that's why we recommended that you pick up and subscribe to our newsletter that's in the chat there.
Brilliant.
During the individual challenge webinars as well, we'll be sharing the sign up. So the call for ideas launches next week, and you'll be able to submit ideas through that call for ideas portal until the start of August, pretty much, isn't it, Kate? And then at that point, you'll need to partner with an energy network to take your application forwards. The energy networks are the partners that submit the idea. So that will happen tail end of September, I think, this year, is it? Or November.
Thank you, Kate, and thank you, David. And if I just stick with you, David, we've had questions with regards to sort of technology readiness levels, you know, what sort of things that we're aiming for, and also one of the attendees has sort of said about that they've been rejected before because their concept is too early in its development. So what really are we looking at with regards to how developed innovation is going to be, and if it is kind of proof of concept, you know, where does that fit within the sort of discovery alpha beta phases?
Yeah, super. So this all SIF project should be gearing up to be able to carry out a real world at scale nationally significant demonstrator project in the beta phase, which is it'd be about 18 months into the project from where your discovery is awarded. But actually in the discovery phase, we want to focus on the problem, not the solution. So discovery is really looking at the full range of options, which includes doing an assessment of whether the TRL, the integration readiness level, or the commercial readiness level of a range of technologies is going to be ready for it to go into that demonstration. But we're agnostic to where they're at. So you can have a really early TRL technology, and if it's following a really swift development pathway, then that's great. We're interested in seeing that, but it does need to be able to get to the point of going into a real world demonstrator by the time the beta phase comes along.
Thank you, David. I'd like to go over to Manu now to talk a bit about the challenge setting process in more detail. So we've had a question from Kerry around what extent have local authorities and planners been involved in the process thus far, mainly around sort of like regional challenges. And we have had another question later on as well around, you know, kind of the deployment of renewable assets, creates disparity between coastal areas because of like offshore wind, for example. So, you know, can you talk about the who's been involved in the challenge setting, and also around that regional aspect as well?
Sure, thanks, Chris. So absolutely, I think completely recognize the point being made that it's kind of bottom-up energy system planning is critical, and those stakeholders who've got kind of agency, capability, and potentially get impacted by that are important. So we absolutely do engage with them. So we've taken a conscious effort, not only in this round, but in previous rounds, to make sure local authorities, local enterprise partnerships, devolved administrations have all had a chance to feed in. And actually, even when we look at policy commitments, I think my colleague Kate mentioned this when she was talking about her challenge, that we're quite aware that some of the devolved targets are a lot more aggressive, both in terms of scale and time. And actually, some regions and areas might need to move quicker than kind of if we just look at the national targets. So that's absolutely on top of our mind, and we are really open to kind of regional or place-based approaches to addressing innovations, where particularly these kinds of targets are quite aggressive. I mean, you can look at the heat decarbonization targets in Scotland, or you can look at just net zero targets in London. These are years ahead of what kind of national policy dictates. So we absolutely, so yes, we have spoken to local authorities, devolved administrations. We are very keen to receive applications that take a place-based approach to kind of developing, I guess, aspects of innovation that works. I guess the one point I would make is, one of the aspects of SIF is something that can be scaled off nationally. So even when you're, I guess, doing some bespoke innovation that works for a certain part of UK, it's quite important to keep in mind of how it can be replicated. Yes, with modifications, it needs to be adapted, but that point of how it can be adapted and replicated in other areas are a kind of critical aspect for us, because we're kind of using customer money to kind of fund these innovations. It's important that a kind of wide range of consumers across the UK ultimately benefit if this goes into business as usual. And I think that point covers the different communities as well. So I think we are quite interested in, well, two things. One is more active involvement in community. So an interesting example is challenge 1, where, planning consenting process. One of the things we heard during the discussions was kind of positive business models, and like how can we work with communities to return more value back to them that enables the consenting and the planning process to go faster. And on the other side, how can we reduce impact? So we're already funding projects, for example, that are minimizing impacts on coastal communities through things like mesh, DC networks that kind of reduces the amount of kind of landing spots of kind of offshore connections. So absolutely, those are all quite critical aspects, and they are kind of considered. So yeah, we'd really welcome kind of projects that are addressing those issues.
Thanks, Manu. I'd like to call Padaris to the floor, if that's okay. Can you just go through a bit more information about support for startups, particularly if the support through Innovate UK Edge and how that works? That would be great.
Yeah, happy to do that. So we have a linkage in place with Innovate UK Edge that all SMEs who are looking for help and support as part of SIF projects can get access to that. But there is the potential for support even if you're not in the SIF program. So, and one of the things I'd be happy to do is have a chat with any startup that just wants to understand better what help and support might be available, and where they might fit in that ecosystem. So I think we've got contact details at the end of this, that happy for anybody that wants to reach out. If not, you'll find me on LinkedIn, or I can share my email in the chat.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. I'm going to go into some more technical details around some of the challenges. So Ellen, you covered off challenge 2. Sorry. Would that include neighbourhood level management to answer flexibility and resilience?
Sorry, what was that? Sorry, Christine?
Sorry, the dog went at the same time. Would challenge 2 include neighbourhood level management to answer flexibility and resilience?
I think David would actually probably be better placed to answer that one. David?
Yeah, I think we probably need more detail to understand the full extent of the proposal, but I'd suggest coming along to the challenge specific webinar. You can then look at the partner requirements, but also the aims and outcomes of all those. And this is probably an instance where we have an innovator surgery to understand the proposal in a little bit more detail. I don't see any reason why it would not be eligible at the moment, but we just need to understand a bit more about it.
Brilliant, thanks guys. And David, can I just keep you to pick up on the question around sandpits and discussing ideas with DNOs and HNOs.
Yeah, so the term sandpit is used in different contexts sometimes. So I'm interpreting this one as being, how can we workshop ideas, essentially? We do have those ideation workshops geared towards a specific area, and those are the ones that have been earmarked as priorities from our stakeholders and Ofgem. We do have the capacity to do potentially one or two more of them. So if there is a specific area that you think should be focused, then contact the SIF Ofgem mailbox and we will consider it. There needs to be broad support because those workshops normally include about 40 or 50 people and would want to be in one of the priority change areas, but we're open for that.
Brilliant, thank you. And on challenge 4, will you cover biomethane storage?
I'll take that one. So biomethane storage is not necessarily directly related to challenge 4, but it is something that we are really positive about in the SIF across all of the challenges, specifically because the term flexibility and reducing our fossil fuel consumption across the grid, across both sort of gas and electricity. The reason we've kind of chosen the electrolyzer challenge in challenge 4 is because of the sort of government strategy towards hydrogen, which will be coming to a sort of head in 2026, and we start to make big decisions about hydrogen's role. But yes, biomethane is relevant to our innovation in the SIF, but it's not necessarily tied to challenge 4. That's the answer.
Thank you, Beth.
No worries.
And Manu, I've got some great questions around demand flexibilities and how that reduces network connection times. And somebody's asked, what's a nanogrid? Can you provide a bit more information around those 2 points?
Yeah, I'm not sure I know what nanogrid is, but I can take the first question. I think, so is the question, how does demand side flexibility help? Okay, yeah, I see the question now. So actually, we have an existing project called Dynamic Networks that does this. I think that the theory is that, or the thesis is that you can potentially offer flexible connections. So, for example, if housing association is coming to the network to say, you know, we've got an XMVA connection that we need, and it's in a constrained area. The kind of traditional conventional way might be to say, you know, we'll do a network impact assessment, and it's, you know, it costs so much and it takes so long to connect. But I think there are innovations that explore that, you know, if you could move towards a more proactive way of managing that load to say, okay, actually, if you can install flexibility and make sure your peak load is this, or your, you know, after diversity maximum demand more specifically has been reduced by X%, then what that means is the network potentially might be in a place to offer a connection much faster because the ADMD has been reduced due to the impact of flexibility. So yeah, so there is evidence that you can use flexibility to to accelerate connection times. It is being explored through innovation now. And yeah, I think there's definitely a lot more there, and we definitely see that as an area of exploration in challenge 1. And I'm sorry, I don't know what a nanogrid is.
I'm expecting it
Looks like a very small microgrid, but
very small microgrid, absolutely, maybe a terrace of houses. And whilst I've got you, Manny, can I just pick up on Joe's question around subsea cables and associated transmission infrastructure? Is that applicable to SIF, you know, with OFTOs, etc.?
Yeah, okay. I guess there are 2 ways of answering this question. The concept of meshed offshore systems, multi-point interconnectors are all within scope of SIF, and we actually have existing projects. So, for example, we've got a project called Incentive that is looking at potentially adding novel technologies to the offshore wind, kind of onshore substation of offshore wind, and how that impacts, you know, the overall system. And we've actually got a project that is looking at DC circuit breakers as well, which, you know, potentially could open up kind of more meshed DC systems that's more secure because you can switch off different parts of the offshore wind farm. So yes, there is precedent. We have funded projects in that space. The one thing that I would note is at the moment, we can't have an OFTO lead a project We don't, at the moment, they're not in the list of our kind of licensed kind of energy network, entities to be able to lead, but they can certainly participate in projects as they've been doing in other. So the scope is absolutely is something that we can look at. Just in terms of who can lead it. At the moment, OFTOs can't lead SIF projects, so they need to be part of a project that's led by potentially a transmission operator in this instance.
Christine, can I just add on to Manu's answer? I think that realm of technology is really relevant to challenge 1 and challenge 2. 1, increasing asset rollout in terms of so we can increase renewable generation, and then innovation challenge 2, sort of novel technical and market approaches to deliver an equitable and secure net zero power system. We need people in offshore wind, the people who deal with the connections day to day to provide insight and data into how we achieve and address those challenges. So yes, really relevant to the SIF in many ways.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Beth. Kate, question for you around whether or not industrial heat is suitable for the challenge.
I would maybe go back to David to confirm that one, please.
Yes is the short answer, but a reminder to look at the 4 scope areas within the electrified heat decarbonisation challenge, because we're not looking at developing assets for decarbonising heat, for instance, a widget for industrial heat decarb, but more looking at how we can provision flexibility and how the system integration aspects of heat decarbonisation can take place. So come to the webinar.
Good pitch there. And Kate, you're not going to get away with it. I'm going to ask you around some people are asking, sort of projects that have, or ideas that have already been pitched to the ENA, either through the Smarter Networks portal or at the Innovation Basecamp. How do they fit in with round 3 of the SIF? Is it a case that these ideas need to be repitched into SIF, or is there a way that it can kind of move over, or will they be looked at if they've gone in for Basecamp? Are they going to be looked at as well through the SIF? Can you just provide a bit of clarification?
So the Energy Basecamp, we were involved in that and we worked closely with the ENA. Its aim was to look at the problem statements that the energy networks developed. Now, some of those problem statements were long-term and some of those problem statements were near-term. Now, the energy networks have other funds like the Network Innovation Allowance and business as usual funds. And some of those problem statements within the Energy Basecamp covered those funds. And at the time of the Basecamp, we didn't know the challenges for SIF. So while some of those problem statements now definitely meet the SIF requirements, they didn't know that at the time. But the Basecamp, what I'm trying to say is the Basecamp is funding agnostic. So if you've already submitted an idea through Basecamp, then you don't need to resubmit it through the SIF, because we're sharing information with from ENA into the SIF. If there's elements that have now changed on the back of feedback, then we'd still welcome that, but you don't need to resubmit twice, as any suitable projects have already been picked up by the energy networks from Basecamp.
Okay, and can I just ask David specifically around sort of the funding mechanism and the partnerships? Is it a case of, are there different intervention rates for different types of partners, for example, academics versus small businesses, RTOs, etc.? Can you just talk around sort of the mechanics of the funding for us?
So the SIF funding mechanism operates outside of the subsidy control and state aid regime because it comes from consumers' bills, essentially. So we don't have standard intervention rates. There's an intervention, rather contribution, which is
Oh, I think we might have lost your sound there, David. Or is it me?
Yeah, no, I've lost it too, Chris. If you want to repeat the question, I'm sure we can pick that up with the rest of the team.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kate. Sorry, David. I think your microphone's just gone. Yeah, it was around the types of organisations and the level of funding that can be secured. I think David had covered most of it off.
Yeah, I can just finish on that, Chris, if you like. So all of the project applications are made by the licensee who leads the project, and as part of that project, there'll be multiple project partners typically. Now, what we look for on a project level is a project contribution to be made. Now, how that split is made between the partners is between the partners to decide, but ultimately we're looking for a contribution to come from them. But that does mean, and I think the question came from academia, that it may be that, you know, an academic as part of a project is making less of a contribution from a percentage perspective than other partners might be.
Chris, can I also add, which might answer another question, and it's okay for partners to be outside of the UK, but any demonstrations should be taking place in the UK. There is potential exceptions, but most of the demonstration phase should be taking place in the UK, but we have plenty of international partners in the first 2 rounds as well.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kate. And maybe, Paul, you can answer the question around match funding on the SIF. So somebody sort of said that the Energy Entrepreneurs Fund is currently running round 10. Could that funding or other funding be used as a way of providing those contributions to projects?
Yes is the short answer. I mean, it's because, as David outlined just before his mic went broken, we sit outside of subsidy control because we're not classified as public money. The matching requirement isn't quite the same. Now, typically what we see with the projects that we fund is that where there's a cost for a partner as part of a project, that they'll be meeting some of that cost from their own internal reserves or as part of assets or people they already have, and then they're looking for the delta to come from the fund. But it may be that there's a partner who doesn't have any funds as they come into a project, and they might be looking at how do we make this work. And yes, there's a potential for them to look alongside other funding.
Thanks, Paul. And we've just had a clarification question around RTOs. I think, Andrew, the response is there's different levels of funding depending on what stage you are in the Strategic Innovation Fund. So at discovery phase, everyone, it doesn't matter whether you're an RTO, an academic, a business, they can receive 100% funding. It's entirely up to the project as to how they work that. Whereas when you get further down into the alpha and the beta phases, the amount of funding is available changes depending on the challenge and what's put forward. So it doesn't matter if you're an RTO, an academic or other, there's it's the same rules apply for everyone. Okay, Paul, I'm going to keep you actually. So we've had a few questions around the venture capital pitch platform that you mentioned. Who is it open to? How can companies make use of it?
So it's part of Innovate UK's Innovation Hub. It's open to any company that's had any form of Innovate UK support. So whether that's SIF as a managed programme or any of the other initiatives that Innovate UK runs, I'll need to double check. That might also cover any companies that have also had EDGE support previously, which would open up to a much wider field. But it's a relatively new thing that SIF, that Innovate UK offer. Been really popular with some of our SMEs that are involved in the programme. And it's a real opportunity to almost flip how the kind of standard VC model works, you know, from having to knock on 100 doors to the VCs coming and seeing what we have. So we're hoping to see that grow in its popularity over the near term.
Brilliant, thanks, Paul. And just to answer on Simon's question, yeah, you are right, Simon. The intervention rates are outlined in the Innovation Challenge documents, so all that information can be found there. I've got a quick question around the P2G projects. So have we got Beth? Can you say whether or not will P2G projects need to respond to the hydrogen sale challenge, e.g. secure agreements through the hydrogen business model, RTFOs, contracts for difference, etc.?
we need to be careful not to silo certain types of innovation within each challenge. We are open to lots of things. Obviously, if you have a good case that it fits in with multiple net zero objectives as well, then we'll take that into consideration in assessment of your project. I don't know, Manu, David, do you have anything to back up what I've already said?
Yeah, just to add, Beth, I think we encourage, if, for example, you are bidding into the hydrogen business model or the hydrogen production fund, etc. I think in SIF, we like projects that are coordinated across different government programs. So if you are working on a production project and, for example, you want to explore the flexibility aspect, that would very much be welcome. So, you know, definitely come to the P2G, the Challenge 4 webinar, and we can discuss this in a little bit more detail, or you know, shoot a note out to Beth and I, and we can catch up on that.
Brilliant, thanks guys. And we are sadly out of time for the rest of the Q&As. There was one in that I just wanted to say, and reiterating something that David Boyer mentioned earlier about the Smarter Networks portal. That is where the information is held for all of the projects that have been funded previously through SIF. So please do go there and have a look. You can see the lessons learned from those projects. You can see what's been funded before. You can even get copies of the application so you can see what's involved in it. So just to finally finish off, and as I said, you will get copies of all of these, the slides, the presentation, the recordings, all of the links, all of the chat, etc. It will be coming your way. Just to really reiterate, so on the 1st of June at 9 AM, we will be doing a webinar specifically all about Challenge 1. So if that is what's of interest to you, please do come along. In the afternoon of the 1st of June, we will be covering off Challenge 2, those novel technical process and market approaches. On the 5th of June at 11 AM, Challenge 3, unlocking energy system flexibility for the electrification of heat. And finally, at 3 PM on the 5th of June, enabling power to gas systems. So if any of those are interest of you, please do sign up for those webinars. The links are going to, I think they've already been shared in the chat, but we'll be sending them out again after this. And thank you ever so much. Thank you to all of the presenters and for everyone who's looking. Yeah, and we really look forward to seeing your ideas come through the process. Thank you very much.